And welcome back once again to How to Survive 2025. And for the first time ever, you're listening to it in 2025. I'm Brian Keene.
I'm Dacia M. Arnold.
I'm Jim Cobb.
And guys, wow, Happy New Year, first of all.
Happy New Year. Good to see everybody.
Yeah.
Yay.
Is it wrong if I say the new year seems to have gotten off to a bang for all of us? Is that too dark?
It's been fairly interesting so far.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
kind of
We're off to the races, that's for sure.
kind of expected. It's what we talked about on the show all last year.
Yep.
Here it is. But hopefully, folks have been listening and they've learned, some of those hard skills that we've talked about over the last year to help them with what's happening and what's to come. But just as critical as those hard skills are soft skills. And Jim, you suggested we talk about that today.
Yeah. Soft skills is one of my favorite topics within the preparedness realm, or that fall under the prepper umbrella, for a couple of reasons. Number one, few other instructors are talking about them on a regular basis. And on top of that, these are skills that are going to be useful whether a disaster happens or not. They're daily life skills that a lot of people could benefit from improving and working on. And one of the things we've talked about a lot on this show is the importance of living your life with a prepared mindset, but that isn't limited to end of the world scenarios. We want to be prepared for daily life, and soft skills are beneficial no matter what happens to you.
Right. Just like we talked just a few episodes about financial preparedness and things like that. That didn't necessarily have to do with the zombie apocalypse or an asteroid breaching our atmosphere. Soft skills, yes, they help you in daily life, but they can also help you in a grid down situation.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about that. Dacia, I know you have a lot of questions this episode. But Jim, I've got a list here of some soft skills, and I'd like you and Dacia to add to them if you think of any. Problem solving, interpersonal communication, critical thinking, which I'm accused of not doing all the time. Conflict resolution, leadership. I don't know if there's any more we want to add to that list, but we can talk about that list one by one.
Well, a lot of these things, and a lot of people will look at a list like that and they'll think that those are almost personality traits versus learned skills. And they kind of bridge both. I mean, we all know people in our lives who are seemingly natural leaders. Okay. And leadership is a soft skill. It is something that can be taught. It's something that can be learned. It's something that can be practiced. Some people seem to be naturally more leadership oriented. And an awful lot of people think they're leadership oriented and they really aren't. One of the key things that I've learned over the years is the more a person shouts about how they're a natural leader, the less accurate that description really is.
Hi, Jim.
Hi.
I'm a lady. And no matter how much experience I have, no matter how much knowledge I have, there's going to be a man who talks louder and is bigger than me, who insists that their way is better despite more or less having less experience. So while yes, what you say is true, there are people who just talk louder than everyone else.
Oh yeah.
But those aren't always going to be the good leaders.
Right.
But not to dismiss people who are leaders in an area, but aren't necessarily listened to.
Right. No, what I was going after is that a lot of the people who scream and shout most often that they're the leader, they're the best in the room, whatever,
Mhm.
they come across to me like a real life version of Michael Scott from The Office.
Oh,
Okay.
that's a
Where they
start.
buy their own mug that says that they're the world's greatest boss.
Mhm.
That's where I was going with that, is that a lot of the people who insist they're the best suited for the leadership position really aren't.
Mhm.
Often the best leaders in the rooms are the ones who are quiet, who are observant, who are paying attention to what's going on around. And by God, if somebody would just ask them to speak up a little bit, they've got a world wealth of knowledge to share with everybody. You know, um, when you're in a situation where somebody is being overbearing, whether it's a boss or a coworker or whatever, that's that's another area where soft skills come into play, where we talk about conflict resolution and how to negotiate your way to an agreement with that person about who gets to talk and who gets to do this and who gets to do that. Interpersonal conflict resolution is one of the most important skills somebody can develop. It really is.
Mhm.
And it's not just about finding out who's right in a given situation. It's about making sure that at the end of the day, the work that needs to get done is being done, and it's hopefully being done by the right people. There are countless strategies for resolving conflict. You know, whether we're talking about um, competition, where you set it up as, okay, this team's going to do this team's going to do this project, and whoever gets done first, the best, wins. They get to make the final decision. Or you have collaboration, where you actively work with the other people to try to make what's best for everybody. You know, what you want to avoid are bad feelings that
Mhm.
are going to linger. Um, we've talked about community before, and group survival. And when you talk about that in a preparedness realm, a lot of people have like wish lists, right? Of the types of people they want in their community. They want the ex special forces guys who are going to provide security. They want the emergency room surgeon who's going to be their medical. They want, the food preservation. They want the gardeners. They want all these different things. And all of that is wonderful and good, but the most critical element to the success to any group is compatibility.
Mhm.
You could have the world's top surgeon as your medical provider within your little group, but if they're an insufferable twat who makes everybody feel like crap, they're going to poison that group from within, and it's not going to last. You can have the most skilled security team in the world, but if nobody can get along with these people, the group is going to fail. And that's where leadership comes in. That's where some of these other soft skills come into play.
Jim, can you touch on leadership in acute situations? So, not a long term, but in past episodes we talked about incidents happening in
Yep.
public and things like that, and how being a leader or following leadership in one of those situations, and just any thoughts on that?
Well, when you're in an acute situation, when it's an immediate threat or
Mm-hmm.
risk, or whatever emergency you want to put us in, the leader is the one who's going to make the snap decisions, right? They're the ones who are going to say, Dacia, you go do this. Brian, you go do that. Jim, you go do this. In that moment, you kind of have to trust that the leader knows what they're doing, because you don't have time to argue.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have time to negotiate a better resolution. What you do have time to do is act within your own agency, within your own capacity, to do what you feel is best for the situation. That might be following what the leader told you to do. Say, Dacia, I want you to run into that store, see if they have an AED, and if they do, bring it back to me. And you run in there and they don't have one. Rather than run back, you might make the decision to go to the next store or to
Mm-hmm.
go across the street and see if they have one. You're following what the leader said, but you're adjusting it based on your reality. You know what you're facing in front of you. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. On your recommendation, I read the book The Unthinkable,
Yeah.
and it was insane. It was intense, but it went through all the different disasters that have occurred and the psychology. Has there ever been like too many chiefs and not enough Indians, and then in the
Yeah.
chaos and
Yeah.
it create more chaos?
That's happened. Part of the problem that comes into play is a lack of communication skill
Mm-hmm.
with people. Okay, and here's a real life example. Several months ago, my wife and I went to a training class that was set up north of us. It was a 2-day class on disaster readiness, things like that, put on through a Texas university, but the program itself is affiliated with FEMA and disaster relief organizations, things like that. On day 2, day 1 is all classroom. Day 2, we're doing practical exercises. And one of the exercises they did was they set up a pile of folding tables that were collapsed folding tables with 2 chairs on top of that stack. And the 2 instructors sat in those chairs. And they had taken a ball cap and stuffed it under the corner of the pile. And we were given 2x4s, different lengths of 2x4s. And the objective was to lift the corner of that pile high enough to where you could theoretically extract a human being that's trapped underneath that debris. The ball cap represents that person. All you have to work with are these 2x4s and your group of people. Okay. And we had learned about different types of levers and how to use the 2x4s, things like that. So we start mulling about, and they appointed one person to be the leader of our group. And about 3 minutes in, everybody's talking at once. Nobody's listening to anybody. The leader's trying to tell people what to do, but they can't hear her because other people are jabbering away. Finally, the instructor stopped it and said, okay, you guys need to figure this out. You need to listen to your leader, do it, come up with a plan here. Your person is dying while you're all arguing about what to do. Okay. So then they appointed another leader, not because the first leader did anything wrong, but they wanted to give another person a shot at it. Okay. So people are listening to her, and she starts on this side of the pile, and she says, okay, everybody at the back, do this. Then she goes around to the other side, and she says, okay, everybody at the back, do that. And that's when everything fell apart, because she's speaking from her perspective when she says everybody at the back. Nobody knew where the back was because she keeps moving around the pile. She's just referring to everybody who is on the opposite side of her as the back, but everybody's confused. And that at that point, I stopped the exercise, and I don't. It may have pissed off the instructors. I don't know, but I stopped her. I said, "Hold on. You need to communicate better what you're asking people to do."
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And one of the things we talked about is how in a crisis, you need to be very direct with your instructions, but you also have to be very clear. You can't just say, hey, you go run into that store and see if they have a first aid kit. You say, hey, you in the black shirt and the glasses, run over there and see what they have and then come back to me. And
Mm-hmm.
that's important. You have to tell them to come back because they might not. You have to be very direct. You have to be very explicit and keep the instructions simple. You don't want to give them a laundry list of things to do. You give them 1 or 2 things and say, come back to me. People don't think when they're under stress. They just react. If you give them instructions, 9 times out of 10, they'll follow them. It's on you to make sure that those instructions make sense and are accurate for what's happening.
That's awesome. Thank you.
So okay, we've got military backgrounds.
Mhm.
You
Well,
know,
you two do. I don't.
yeah, we do. Um, you're a public speaker.
Hmm.
Um, I've got a sales background among many things I did before I became a writer. Dacia wrangles an entire family. So we've all got these different backgrounds that sort of play into this. But average listener, they say, you know what? I want to learn more about communication. I want to learn more about leadership. Do they go to one of these business classes at the Holiday Inn? I mean, where does one go to do this?
That was the one thing I didn't prepare for.
Oh man,
this episode, I didn't come up with research material.
Reading is probably the
Yeah.
easiest thing to do. There's
Mhm.
books how to talk to anybody and be their friend. What's it called? You know what I'm talking
How
about.
to how to
How to
influence
influence
people or
Make
something like
friends and
that.
influence people.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Something. But there are very popular. I would call them self-help books
Hmm.
out there that teach these soft skills of clear communication. Brene Brown is like my go-to for any type of team dynamics
Hmm.
and functionality within a team. The Covey Institute
Yep.
is a huge
Yep.
one as
Yep.
well.
Thank you. I was trying to come up with that name. I was desperately trying to figure it out, and I couldn't remember.
There's a lot. I don't read any of those things, obviously, but no, I can't get enough of these sort of nonfiction kind of guidance as to
Mhm.
how to be a professional, how to win people over,
Right.
how to kind of communicate effectively, especially
Mhm.
with my children even. But even a dynamic where you aren't so familiar with each other in the military, it's the knife hand.
Right.
That the knife hand is the authority, and you just do kind of, well, you used to do what you're told. Now I think you're allowed to ask why. And it's a lot has changed.
Yeah, I don't understand the military anymore. I'm not sure why they're having such a crisis in enlistment.
Oh,
Well, to your point, Brian, you mentioned, these business development stuff. Like Dacia mentioned, the Covey Institute,
mm,
a lot of that stuff is applicable. It doesn't seem like it would be, but it is. When we talk about leadership, when we talk about interpersonal communication, conflict resolution, all of these are things that are taught through a lot of business courses, seminars, things like that. A company I worked for years ago, I worked for Shopko stores for several years. And the leadership at the time, they had a charter subscription to
mm,
anything Covey wrote. Okay. And it was demanded upon all management down at store level that we all had, they would buy these books by the case and ship them out to stores, and all management had to read them, study them. There were meetings about them, the whole 9 yards. It was every year, it was something else. You know, I don't necessarily agree with going that far with it, but they are good resources to learn some of these basic skills. But just like making fire, just like scratch cooking, just like food preservation, you're going to learn it best by doing it, by
mm-hmm.
interacting with people and practicing some of these, whether we're talking about conflict resolution skills or leadership or just general communication. You're going to learn best by finding out what works best for you in the real world.
When I worked in emergency management, we all did it's a personality test called DISC, and it's like
Okay.
4 quadrants of communication and interest. And we all just posted our results outside of our cubicle, and that would help inform like our leadership, other departments, whoever it was who wanted to talk to us, how best to communicate with us, what appeals to us, what doesn't appeal. It's just a way, and it's not so being manipulative, but it's also being like empathetic and
Yeah.
reaching somebody on their own level. And I think that a lot of times in these very aggressive leadership positions, one, there's not enough time.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you just need the order the message and get it done. And other times, like there is time to be nice about it.
Yep. Well, and that kind of goes along with learning how you learn.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are very hands-on oriented. Some people are very visual. Some people are very auditory. You need to figure out what works best for you when it comes to learning new material so that you can tailor your own self-education and take best advantage of the materials that are out there right now. You know, we live in an age where no matter what skill you want to learn, there are a bazillion different ways to get that information. Take advantage of that while you can, but tailor it so that you're taking the best advantage of what's out there. If you are a very visual person, sitting and reading book after book after book after book probably isn't going to be as effective as watching videos and then doing some hands-on, things like that. And that plays right into the personality test that you took.
Mm-hmm.
You learn more about yourself more than anything else when you do that kind of thing. And I think sometimes there's the light bulb moment where like, oh, that's why I'm screwed up. I get it now.
Oops.
Yeah,
So we just moved into my neighborhood like 3 years ago. I know maybe 2 or 3 people in the neighborhood of like 20. So having the background that I do, it's always kind of in the back of my mind to find a way to reach out to my neighbors. And by neighbors, I mean they're like a little ways away.
Yeah.
We're just kind of tucked into this little area. So how can I go about reaching people in this regard? Is that, am I gonna, it's gonna come off wackadoo? Is that just the risk I take by knocking on a door and say, hey, my husband and I were military and we're interested in preparedness?
What about neighborhood watch?
I don't know.
Are you in an area that a neighborhood
Watches?
watch would
Probably
be
not.
viable?
Well, neighborhood watch programs are a great stepping stone. Okay. Many, if not most, law enforcement agencies will help you set up neighborhood watch programs. And once you've opened that door,
Yeah.
then you can start talking about, a little bit more about the preparedness angle for it. When it comes to broaching the topic itself in those meetings or whatever, use the media, particularly TV shows and movies. Hey, did anybody see that movie Greenland that was out a couple of years ago? What did you think about that? And it gives you kind of a read for where people are. And then you can tailor it from there. I can tell you that in my own experience, after doing this for as many years as I have, it's been very rare that I've had anybody just flat out tell me, all you preppers are whack jobs. 99 times out of 100, it'll be, I'm not like end of the world, but yeah, we've got some extra stuff. I see what's happening on the news, and you just kind of spin it from there and see where it leads.
Thank you. That was actually a real life question.
I mean, have a yard sale, and then when the neighbors all walk over from their houses, use that as an opportunity to, little flyer in the mailbox. I mean, there's all kinds of ways.
You could go so far as to just in the spring or summer have a barbecue, invite everybody on the block, and
use the example. My favorite book on leadership skills is a book by Mark Twain. It's called Tom Sawyer. And in there, he has to whitewash a fence, and it's a really beautiful example of how a leader, gets people to do what he needs them to do. But
Yep.
maybe you could set up a fence that needs whitewashed.
Hmm.
All right, now before we close out, Dacia brought up something before we hit record.
Mhm.
When while the topic was soft skills, she initially thought that that was a tactile reference. Soft skills meant things like sewing.
Like
Um,
sewing.
yeah, but I made the argument that I think sewing is a soft skill. It's a talent. Not everyone can sew. I
No.
sure as hell can't sew. Um, it's a talent that people have here in our very cushy 21st century world.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a skill that could also be applied to a grid down situation.
Mhm.
Sure.
So I thought it's been many episodes since we gave our listeners a homework assignment.
Mhm.
I thought this might be a good homework assignment. Consider what your soft skill is at home and how that could be applied to a survival situation.
Mhm.
And Dacia, you brought up sewing. What are some other soft skills you have in your day-to-day life?
I
that you
can rechain a chainsaw.
Nice.
I
I can-
hate doing that.
It is difficult. It takes patience. And probably more than two hands, but
Yeah,
I'm a
I've
mom.
got 3 trees down in the backyard from the last snowstorm, not this
Oh
week's
man,
snowstorm,
yeah.
that I haven't taken care of yet because I know the chain will come off the damn saw at least twice, and
Or pinch and the
yeah,
between
Yeah.
that's half my day is just working with that stupid chain.
with the chainsaw. I had another one. What was it? I don't know. Forgetting what I was thinking. That's
That's a soft skill, is it?
oh my goodness. Recovering. I know.
Well, there is one other one that I wanted to make sure we touched on
Okay.
in our conversation today, and that's critical thinking.
Yes. Sorry.
There's a lot going on in the world, and we are inundated with information that is largely unvetted. And critical thinking is how you're going to at least begin the process of deciding what makes sense, what might be possible, what's outright bullshit, and how you're going to act upon that information, if at all. It's not easy. It really isn't, because you have people sharing things, on social media, for example. You have people who will share every single link that comes across their feed, whether it's realistic or not. And you have people who will believe every single thing they read, every single thing they're told. And at the opposite end, you have people who aren't going to believe a damn thing you tell them, no matter what. Um, it's important that, particularly with social media, before you click share on any news story, on any link, whatever it is, think for a second. Does this make even a little bit of sense? Does this sound like it could be accurate in the least? A prime example, I saw no less than 5 different people on my Facebook feed today
Mm.
sharing posts about how an attorney told me to post this, that I do not give Facebook permission to use my photos and blah, 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 blah,
Yeah,
blah,
that
blah,
doesn't
blah, blah,
work.
blah, blah. No. And yet people share it constantly, all day, every day, because they think they're doing something and they're not. They're just adding the static and noise, you know. And 12 half second of thinking about it would help you realize, yeah, no, this doesn't make any kind of sense at all, you know.
So, on the topic of social media sharing, also, I know a lot of people will use social media as a search engine. So they'll go and they'll hear something and they want to just kind of form their own opinion. So they'll
Yeah.
Google that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then they'll receive just they'll read whatever article that they choose, and then in their social media they'll go back and that message is perpetuated. So regardless if it's true or not, because that person looked up that specific angle of the topic,
Right.
that angle of the topic is going to be perpetuated, and maybe even within your own thinking substantiated by the sources that you see. What I challenge our listeners to do, when you search one specific angle of a topic that you were interested, to also search the opposite angle of the same topic. So that way, those messages, you're kind of getting both sides of the story. And then you can look at the sources of information and then be able to form a better opinion, versus having it siloed from one side.
Right. So I always have impressed upon both of my sons and my stepdaughter, if you're only watching MSNBC or you're only watching Fox News, you're only getting one side of the news story. And even if you watch them both, you're often not getting the entire news story. You have to seek this information out, and you have to be able to take the time to parse the bullshit and the partisanship from the actual facts, the objective facts of the news story. You know.
So this happened to us this weekend. Jim shared an article, and then I got an email from the New York Times, and I don't know where they land on the bias scale. But from what Jim shared with us, it was more of yes, there is a need for heightened awareness, but then the New York Times, who goes to, so Jim's source targets people who are interested in that subject. The New York Times is just any citizen, like, played it down from what I read in the article. Totally played down whatever potential was there. Now, can we trust big media anymore? Or are citizen journalists who should not be widely dismissed, I believe.
I personally
listen to.
Personally, the way I do it, and I'm not saying everyone needs to do it this way. I'm saying this is what works for me. I use a news aggregator. If folks don't know what a news aggregator is, I'll use the granddaddy of them all as an example, Drudge Report. If some in our audience are groaning right now and saying, oh, Drudge Report is a right-wing mouthpiece, my friend, you have not visited Drudge Report in many, many years. They're about as neutral as it can be, because all they do is post links to headlines from around the world, local areas, regional areas, nationwide, worldwide. And what I have found over the years, if I merely skim those headlines, and they're all reputable news sources, okay? But just skimming them can give you a snapshot of where the world is that day. And the example you're talking about, the news article that Jim shared versus the New York Times version, that morning on the Drudge Report, if you looked at the world itself, everything seemed okay. But if you dug deeper and started looking at some of these regional reports, shit was breaking off. So it was very much somewhere in the middle. So that's how I do it. I miss the days when you could just have Walter Cronkite tell you what was going on, or Tom Brokaw would tell you what was going on, and you could believe it. Unfortunately, those days are never coming back. We will never have that again. And if you want to be an informed citizen of the world, you have to inform yourself. And the only way to do that is take the time to read through it. And as Jim said, practice critical thinking.
And one other corollary to that is pay attention to what your sources are saying and how accurate they turn out to be down the road. And the ones who are repeatedly missing the boat or getting it wrong, stop consulting them for information and seek out other sources that turn out to be more reliable. You know, one of my pet peeves in the preparedness world are the YouTube influencers who everything is inflammatory, everything is clickbait, everything is, you need to listen to this right now or you're all going to fucking die. And then the next week, it's a brand new threat. And we've
Yep.
forgotten about what happened before. It drives me nuts because it gives preparedness a bad name. It gives us a black eye. It doesn't accomplish anything productive except for that influencer. It generates clicks, likes, and shares. It gives them traffic, so it increases their wallet. That's all that it does. If you're watching those videos or you're reading those blogs, and after a while, it's like, well, no, that never happened. They told me that this was going to happen. It didn't happen. They told me this was going to happen. It didn't happen. How many more times do you have to listen to them before you finally give up and you move on to something else?
Mm-hmm.
You know, it becomes very much a Chicken Little scenario. And I don't have time for that. You know, personally, I would much rather rely on sources that have proven to be reliable in the past. Using a news aggregator is an outstanding approach because it's a one-stop shop. You know, it gives you a very broad view that you can then drill down from there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's important to understand that every media source, from the biggest to the smallest, has a bias.
Hmm.
Every single one of them. They've developed an audience. They know what that audience wants to hear. So that's how they're going to phrase every single story that comes across their feed because they don't want to lose viewers. They don't want to lose listeners. So they're going to tailor everything to suit the people that are padding their wallets. You need to look beyond that and you need to
Mm-hmm.
look at other angles, like Dacia said. Look at the opposite end and see what they're saying, and then kind of put together the facts from there.
And if there is no opposite end and no one's saying anything otherwise, doesn't mean that your angle is true.
Mm-hmm.
It just means only one side cares.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And so maybe there is no sides and it doesn't matter.
Yep. Yep.
All right, guys. Anything else?
Ooh, I have one more thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's going to be okay.
Yes, that's true. It's true. So, all right. So this week, folks, think about those soft skills you have there at home that you're really good at. And
Cooking on fire.
You can
Mhm.
apply to grid depth. For me, for example, I can grow anything.
Oh,
You know, I don't know where I picked up the skill, but I am a master gardener. You can't see it, but those watching on YouTube, on top of the bookshelves above me right now, I've got green beans, I've got red and green bell peppers,
mm.
and some other things that maybe I shouldn't cop to growing here on live on YouTube. But you know, all green, all doing quite well. Something else I can do is I can repair just about any radio you hand.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
Not all electronics,
Mhm.
strictly radios, but you know.
Mhm.
So those are two soft skills that, you know, if an asteroid hits the planet tomorrow and we're in a nuclear winter, I'll still have that ability. I will be able to grow peppers despite the fact that the sun is blocked out.
Excellent.
So, all right. Well, yes, it is going to be okay. We will see you next week with another episode, How to Survive 2025.